I'm really thankful to be here.
Um,
This weekend's camp meeting, we have 3 studies together with me. The last one, the third one, I'm hoping will be a question and answer if you have questions. I haven't received any questions yet. Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, we thank you that we have the privilege of being able to come together to try to understand prophecy, not only what's happening in the world, but what our place and our duty is. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. I know we're all familiar with Ellen White. I don't know how much of her material, of her books that you have read. Not just the major 5 books, but the testimonies. And her biographies. So I don't know how familiar you are with her life and her ministry. So just want to spend a few moments talking about a particular aspect of her life. I'm sure you'll all realise that Ellen White lived in a man's world. At every strata of society, everything was controlled by men. And it was quite revolutionary at that time to have such a prominent female speaker. But as you know, she was not just a speaker, she was also a leader of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, her relationship with the church was complicated, to say the least. She had to deal with members, and she also had to deal with leaders. And almost all of those leaders were men. So there were 2 men in particular that are worthy of mention. I don't know who you imagine those 2 men are. Don't know if anybody has any thoughts. Or do you want a clue? A clue? Uriah Smith? Uriah Smith is certainly one of the men, but not the 2 that I'm thinking. Butler? He's another man, but not one of the 2 that I'm thinking. So the two men that I'm thinking of, one is at the beginning of her, we'll call it her career, and one is at the end of her career. What, who did you say? A.T. Jones and E.J. Wagner, they are two men as well, we'll talk about. Miller. So Miller really has no interaction with Ellen White. She's only a small girl. We call her a teenager when she meets him. Her husband. So that's the first man, James White. And James White is going to get Ellen White into trouble. So he's at the beginning, the first man. So there's plenty of others. And who's the last one that would be on our list? If James is the first. Bates. No, Bates dies somewhere in here. So Bates isn't. Oh, Willie or William White. Her husband and her son. So in between those two men, we've listed a few of them. Uriah Smith, Butler, did someone say Daniels? I think someone said Daniels, I think. Oh, someone, it was Haskell, was it? Prescott, and A.T. Jones and E.J. Wagner. Okay, so all of these are important leading men. What have I just misspelled? Oh, on an S, sorry. Okay. Um, all of these are all leading men in the church. And she's going to have to work with these men. And Ellen White has a difficult job. She's a complicated person, of course, like everyone is, I guess. And part of her work is to get close to the leadership of the church, but also to remain distant from it. So they want to make her, let's call it an ordained priest. Maybe we'd call it an elder. And to give her a church salary. And she tries to avoid all of these things because she sees it as a trap. So if the church pay you, then the church does what? It's Yes, if the church pays you, the church controls you. And it would have been quite a radical thing to have an ordained female elder or priest or pastor. So she has a very awkward relationship with the church. But the two men at the beginning, at the end, are family, and family you can't avoid. And they're both very powerful men. You may not have heard much about Willie White, but he was a very powerful man. Especially because Ellen White's older now, and he is going to manage, we might say even control her life. He's like a gatekeeper because of her fragility. So, as Ellen White works with all of these men, we have 8 of them, there's going to be an accusation. What's the accusation that's going to be leveled against Ellen White? As she works with these leaders. Does anybody have any thoughts? No one? She's going to be accused of being influenced by the men. And why would that be dangerous? Why would it be dangerous to be influenced by men? It's not the men, it's leaders. Who is Ellen White? What is her job function? Prophet. So prophets are supposed to take their instructions and their information from whom? From people or from God? From God. So it's clear. Now, as she works with people, you can imagine that if she gets into agreement with James, a couple of years later, she gets into agreement with Uriah, and you go all down the list, people will accuse her of being influenced by these people. So, for instance, Ellen White's going to have her major visions at the beginning of her ministry. And who's going to be with her? James White. So people will accuse her and him that he shaped her visions and her testimonies. That means her writings. They reasoned that because they live together and they work together. Now, of course, you know that they disagreed a lot. And you know they had marital problems. I don't know if you know that they were separated for a while because she'd had enough of him. Yeah. because he became overbearing and wanted to manage her. And she refused all of that. And she writes publicly in her writings that James White didn't control or manage her writings. There were lots of doctrinal fights after James White died. And one of the leading theologians in the church is Smith. They're friends and they work closely together. And Ellen White agrees with Smith on many doctrinal points. So it's natural to think, if you disagree with Smith, who is just a person, and Ellen White says, I agree with him. You can't fight against a prophet very easily. So what's your angle? What will you do? You'll say that Ellen White's been influenced by Smith, not by God. So her particular understanding on some doctrinal point, she's now speaking not on behalf of God, but on behalf of Smith, because he's manipulated her. She disagrees with that too. Butler. Which history is Butler famous for? Do you know? It's the 1888 history, the Minneapolis Conference. And he, Butler, is going to be in opposition to Jones and Wagner. He's the General Conference president. And people say that he had influenced Ellen White. She again disagreed. Then Daniels. She supported many of his reforms. Again, a leader. And he's going to reorganize the church. I don't know if you knew that. That's what he's famous for. So Butler, he was supposed to help usher in the message of Jones and Wagner. Usher in, bring it in, support it. But he fights against it. Prescott, Daniels, not Prescott, Daniels, he was raised up as the leader to reorganize the church because its organization had become dysfunctional. Prescott, he did a lot of educational reforms. So you have to ask yourself, Ellen White's understanding of education, the reforms of education that she speaks of, is that from God or Prescott because they see eye to eye on many things. Jones and Wagner, you you should all be familiar with the accusations there. The support that she gave those two people and the price she had to pay for that. You remember what happened to her? She got ostracized and got shipped off where? Into the wilderness. Australia. It's not the wilderness now. It's a nice place. But she gets punished. And she is in such agreement with them, and particular Jones, he's very charismatic, and so it's obvious that people would accuse her of being influenced by him. But she insisted that God told her to support these two people. And then the last person, Willie White. He was, if we say it this way, was raised up to care and protect Ellen White in her old age. What we might call the retirement years. And you would be surprised at the amount of control that this man had over her life. Who's allowed to see her and who is not allowed to see her? Where she goes, where she doesn't go. So you can see the accusations are so clear. Now, for each of these men, she says that they did not control me. Now, I want us to see the tension that exists when a person like Ellen White has to work with the church leadership, has to train them, agrees with them, maybe rebukes them, but doesn't cast them away. You can see when this prophet has to deal with these human leaders, some of them become her close friends. One of them becomes her husband. They have a son. You can see how these accusations can take a life of their own, that they can become alive. And the result of all of that is that people have doubts about her ministry. Her views, her thoughts, and the reason why she does things. Even though she says she's not influenced by people. This shadow follows her all of her life. So I wanted to mention that and for us to think about it for some time. And maybe we'll come back to that. Over the past few weeks, we've been speaking, or I've been speaking, about Revelation 17, of course. And then in September, I think it was, I spoke about a new subject, adultery. And people were not sure why I brought that up in the midst of studies related to Revelation 17. That was a couple of months ago now. Many studies have been done since then. And I think most of us, even if you don't fully understand the arguments, maybe you don't even agree with the arguments, maybe you think we're incorrect. But what should be clear now is the reason why we have discussed adultery is to have more clarity on the subject of the Sunday law. Did anybody not know that? So put your hands up if you didn't know the reason why we're speaking about adultery is connected to the Sunday law. Okay, so no one put their hand up. That means everybody has some idea. So just so that we're clear on the connection, let's turn to Revelation 17. And we didn't do it that way. We sort of worked through it backwards, if you like. But I want us to turn to the verse. I spoke about this verse, I think, at the end of last week's presentation, and other people have spoken as well. So, an angel has been sent from heaven to speak to John. You all know that this is not John the Baptist, this is John, one of the 12 disciples. Some people might say Jesus' his favorite disciple. So John's going to be instructed on many issues regarding the great controversy. And he's going to be taken through history in a very systematic fashion. Not only so he can help the people who are alive when he is on earth, but future generations. You remember, if you read the New Testament, that after Jesus died, people thought that he would return really quickly within their lifetime. And Jesus never said or did anything to disagree with that. Not long after Jesus has gone to heaven, something begins to happen in the church. People get old and they begin to die. And they get confused about what's happening because they think that the prophecy that they believed in is now failing. And you know that the word Christ is the Greek word for Messiah. And you know that there were many Christs at that time. Before Jesus came, when Jesus was doing his ministry, and afterwards. There were Christs everywhere. And so the church began to worry that maybe Jesus was one of those false Christs. So Paul says, don't worry. You have misunderstood prophecy, and I'm going to tell you something important. Something depressing. Every single one of you are all going to die. And your children, and your grandchildren, and for a lot of generations before Jesus will ever come back. Can you imagine how depressing that must be? If someone was raised up in 1888 and says, let me tell you, you're all going to die, and your children, and your grandchildren, long before Jesus comes back. What would Ellen White have done to that person? She would have disfellowshipped them. They would have been thrown out. So Paul makes an important step in our understanding of prophecy. So Paul, we're not going to turn to any verses. He's going to get prophecy and he's going to divide it into 3 parts. The present, they're all going to die, remember? Then we'll call it the time of trouble. And then we'll call it the end. That's what Paul is going to give us. And he's quite clear on that. And it's this framework that Paul provides us with that helps you to unlock Daniel and Revelation. So if Paul gave us this, and we'll call it 1, 2, 3, and I'm not giving any dates. Revelation 17 verse 1. This angel is going to speak to John, and we're going to cut into the verse, and it says, I will show you the judgment of the whore. Sorry for bad language. Based upon what we've just spoken of, Paul, that's on the board, when where is John in real life? 1, 2, or 3? 1? We all agree with that. Good. That's the present. He's living at the same time as Paul is. Then it says, I will show you the judgment of the whore. Where are you now? 1, 2, or 3? Does everybody agree 3? Yes. So when it says judgment of the whore, that means she's now in court being judged about her behavior. And her behavior is where? 1, 2, or 3? 2. She did something in 2, and then she's going to be judged at 3. Does that make sense? So, John's alive at 1. There's this woman that comes at 2, and you can guess that she doesn't do anything good. You can tell that by her title. And as you read, you'll see that, obviously. But just in the verse, the way it's written, it says, I'm going to show you what the judgment is on this woman. And that's at the end, number 3. If we can just remember this really basic structure, it helps us to put things into their proper place. So we've got 4 waymarks. Can someone tell me waymarks? We'll call it A, B, C, D. We know D is the second advent. So we know that. A, we know that is, we'll call it the history of the disciples. No, we'll just call it Paul without giving a year. This is Paul and the apostles. What is B and C? Who wants to tell me what they would be? Any thoughts? Yes, I think. Yes. 538 to 1798. So we might call it the Dark Ages. You use that term? So in Revelation 17, it doesn't use the word Dark Ages. Uses another word. It's in verse 3. And the word is wilderness. So we'll put Revelation 17:3 and Revelation 12. I'll have to check the verse unless someone knows. 14. So we have a nice structure now. We have the present, time of the apostles, the early church, lasts a long time, over 400 years. Then the Dark Ages, or the time of trouble. And then the end. The time of the end. End of the world. So, back in Revelation 17, it says, I'm going to show you what judgment will come upon this woman for all that she has done. And we could go to another chapter in the book of Revelation, and you see what she has done. She's killed the saints. That's her primary crime. So in verse 2, this is the link with adultery. With whom, talking about the woman, the whom in the verse is the woman. Don't know how it reads in French. So, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. So, the woman and the kings have been in a relationship that's called fornication. And the product of that fornication has damaged the people. So if we were to use the phrase collateral damage, we would know what that means. Yeah. So the people are relatively innocent, and they're not involved in this bad thing that's going on. Everybody okay with that? Any questions? All straightforward? So I don't want to worry people or scare you. I don't want to make an issue bigger than it really is. But there is a disagreement in our movement at the moment. You should all be aware of that. And it's about these people. So when you go to Revelation 17, speaks about the people. At one level, it's you. You live on this earth. You're citizens. Doesn't say a particular country. It says kings. And I know that it's in context speaking about number 1, 2, or 3. We're not sure. Remember before we said she's done something, then she's going to be judged. We can't get it backwards. When did she do the thing? Whatever the thing is. Number 2, before you were even born. We're okay with that? This fornication she's committing happened before you were born. Before 1798. We're not mistaken on that. And then she's going to be judged. So we've discussed these things before, and I know that they're not straightforward. And I know I make it sound easy when it's not that easy. But bear with me. So these people will say they're like you, if not you. Just normal people. Are they innocent from what you read in verse 2? Yes. Collateral damage. Do they do bad things? For sure. Because they get drunk. Read the verse 2. The inhabitants have been made drunk with wine. So someone's been giving them wine. Maybe they were forced to drink it. We're not clear. But the way it reads is that they're not the criminals or the instigators. Everybody okay with that? So there's these people who are innocent. Now, if we go to chapter 13, Revelation 13, this is a story that begins where? 1, 2, or 3? Good. Number 2. No, you said 2? 3, I thought you said, yeah. Number 2. The story begins in number 2. Verse 1. We'll get there. So, in verse 1, there's a beast that's in the sea. We're not going to prove it, but that sea is number 2. Then the beast dies. Beast dies, and then lots of things happen, and another beast comes. We'll find that in verse 11. The second beast. Where are we now? 1, 2, or 3? Now we're at number 3. So this beast that's like a lamb, we're in number 3. So we're okay with that? Then what's going to happen is this beast, number 2, is going to change. So that's one part of the story. And another part of the story is that the beast that dies is going to resurrect in number 3. We're okay with that? So let's read verse 13. Does anybody have any questions? Do you have a question? Wait for the mic. Let's answer your question if we can.
Elle ressuscite au numéro 3. Normalement, elle meurt au numéro 3.
Alors, why she resurrect in number 3? Because she has to what she died in number 3, she have to resurrect in number 3.
Can you repeat your question again? Just the translation bit. So I get the numbers right. Do you need to translate, or did you? I think the question's fine. Did you get the translation good? Try again.
Posez la question, pourquoi elle ressuscite au numéro 3 alors que normalement, elle meurt au numéro 3?
Why she resurrect in number 3, whereas she's supposed to die in number 3?
It's a very good question. So, before I answer that specifically, I want to. We're in verse 11. Verse 12 says, this second beast that comes from the land, this beast has all the power of the beast that came from the sea. That's verse 12. And says to those, tells everybody they need to worship the beast that came from the sea. I don't know if you have the Bible in front of you. Does it say it the way I've just described? You agree? Two points. The land beast is as powerful as the sea beast, and tells everybody to worship the sea beast. And then it says that the wound that the sea beast received is going to be healed. Verse 13 does lots of things to inspire people. That's 13. Then 14, talking about the miracles that happened in 13, tells you the reason for those miracles. They were done to trick you. Verse 14, the miracles were to deceive you. Is everybody okay with that? Then it says, and said to all the people that the people should make an image. So the people are being told what to do, And why are they listening? Because they've been tricked. We see that in the verse? So, are these people innocent? They looked at some miracles, got tricked, and while they're getting tricked, they're told to build an image. So, if we take that with 17, chapter 17, it doesn't say that they're deceived. What does it say in chapter 17? They're made drunk. So I want us to see that the people are collateral damage. So we have to ask ourselves, when we come to understand end time prophecy, who are the guilty people and who are we'll call them the innocent ones? When we try to develop a story, where should our attention be? Should it be with the woman and the kings or the people? That's 17. Or in 13, with the land beast, the sea beast comes back to life, or the people? Who are the real criminals? Where should our attention be focused upon? You have to answer that question for yourselves. Because what we're discussing, whether you're in 13 or 17, is the rise of these powers. In 17, they might be called heads or beasts. And in chapter 13, they're definitely called beasts. So is the story that we should be focusing on, is it about the beasts or about the people? The reason why that is important to you is because when you try to understand the Sunday law issue, are you looking for a theme or a story that's about beasts, kings, women, or people? That's what you have to ask yourself. And if you want to go for dates, July, November, or January the next year, in those three events, where do you see the people? We'll call it 1, 2, 3 again. July, November, January. Where do you see the people? In July, in November, or in January? Nowhere? Oh, November, they said. Everybody agrees November. So you know, just conceptually, that the nature, the property of November is very different to July or January. Because in July, you can see kings, women, and beasts. And you can see that in January. Even if you don't understand the story well, you know there are no people involved in those two events. You see the people in November. So you need to be clear on that when you begin to try to understand for yourself which is the correct event. So, we had a question about this resurrection. Now, in Revelation 17, it says, I'll show you the judgment of this woman. So, this is where it gets a little bit complicated because what we need to understand, and I've mentioned this in previous studies, so we'll just say Revelation 17. It's not the only place that it's found. You have two views. You have the panoramic and you have the dispensational. When you take the the panoramic, we ask ourselves the question, how many women are there? The answer is one. One woman. Number two, if you go to dispensational view and you ask the same question, how many women are there? The answer is 7. So, when we speak about the judgment of the woman, this is not that straightforward because that woman that's going to be judged, she got killed at the end of number 2 at sea. She was killed. Found guilty, judged, killed, punished. Just like the sea beast of chapter 13 died. Now, this woman can't die because there's one woman from beginning to end, and C 1798 is not the end. As soon as she dies at C 1798, another woman appears. It's the same woman, She just looks a bit different. And this woman is going to continue her bad behavior in the history of number 3, and then she'll be finally judged. So in verse 1, it says, I'll show you the judgment. She's going to get judged at C and at D twice, because it's going to, that history will repeat. The judgment for the woman, she gets killed in 1798, C. We'll say she escapes death. She comes back, disguised as someone else, continues the same activity, sleeping with the kings, and then her final true judgment will come at the end of number 3. And that's the same story that you see in chapter 13. That the land beast is going to make everybody worship the sea beast that resurrects. So, in summary, what we've discussed today was 2 parts. Part 1 was a discussion about Ellen White and how difficult her work was in trying to support the movement whilst not being controlled by it. Nevertheless, she got accused of being molded and manipulated by the leaders of the movement. They influenced her, and she wasn't being led by God. We discussed that, and we didn't come to any application or any further than just pointing out that history. Then we continued our study on the subject of adultery, and I gave hopefully a simple perspective which was the work of Paul. How Paul was instrumental in tying Daniel and Revelation together. He explains that there will be 3 dispensations which will last centuries. The middle one is the 1260, the longest segment. That framework that's on the board at the moment allows us to understand what the dispensation of number 3 is all about. We will discuss it more in the following presentations. In Revelation 17:2, it uses the word fornication. And at a minimum, fornication is very similar to adultery. We'll discuss the differences. But this is why we're talking about this subject. Because it's right at the beginning of chapter 17. And it's important to understand the nuances, the fine points of this issue. Then we observed the people. I know the people that it's speaking of is in number 2. But what happens in number 2 gets repeated in number 3. But I want us to see that the people are collateral damage. When someone makes you drunk, you're not really responsible for your behavior. In chapter 13, we saw exactly the same thing. So in Revelation 17, the word is drunk. And in Revelation 13, what's the word there? Do you remember? In the King James, it used the word deceive. And I use the word tricked. So the people are tricked in chapter 13 and they're made drunk in chapter 17. So what we want to understand is the degree of culpability or criminality of these people. Of you. How guilty are you? The reason why that becomes important is because if you look at July, November, or January, the people, these people, you people, are only involved in the November event, not the other two. And however you view things or whatever conclusion you come to, you have to recognize that. And the way you know what's right and what's wrong is by making sure your story is consistent. Whether you go to 13 or 17, it says what? A woman and kings. Or a land beast and a sea beast. That's what it's talking about. The people are bystanders. Manipulated to achieve what the king, the woman, and the beasts want. And so if you're going to choose one of those 3 dates, You need to understand the role of the people and their relationship to these prophetic events that are occurring. We'll stop there. Let's close with prayer. Holy God, we thank you that through your goodness and mercy, you're able to guide, direct, and bless us. It's our hope, each of us bowed before you, to have a clearer understanding of truth through the work of the Holy Spirit, through a clearer understanding of your word. May your desire and our desire be united so that we can understand the truth. In Jesus' name, amen.